This episode is dedicated to the memory of David Keep, who died last week. Welcome to episode 13 of the UFOcast as Captain Scarlet. This time we're talking about the heart of New York. As I said a couple of episodes ago with Avalanche, this was one of the 4 on VHS tape number 5 that I had when I was a kid. So these are the episodes that are most familiar to me. Again, this is another one that I really enjoy. It's different from your standard episode. It asks kind of questions that Captain Scarlet doesn't normally get into, because the Mistron threat is very, interesting this time, because it's not about killing somebody or blowing something up that's an obvious military target or political target. It's one of those cryptic threats, again, like we had with Operation Time, where they're like, oh, there's a mystery about what they mean, the heart of New York, and talking about human greed and corruption, which is then counterpointed at the end with Colonel White's conclusion about humanity, saying, oh, well, we may have these criminals, but humans aren't really like that, which I'm not entirely sure that I agree with Colonel White's assessment of the situation, to be honest. Yeah, as a Christian, I think we're all wrong-uns to some extent, and we need salvation, which is not where I expect Captain Scarlet episodes to take you. I suppose this episode is also more adult in the sense of the staging of the accident, with them pretending that they're drunk. It was quite adult, really, I suppose, quite dark. But let's talk about the meat of the episode. The idea that you have these bank robbers who break into a Spectrum vault, thinking that Spectrum are going to have a load of gold, and coming away with a bunch of documents. And I suppose it's interesting that this episode gives us an insight into what the general population know. The Mistrons broadcast their threat to the world because these robbers clearly know that New York is a target, because that's where they try and play on that later in the episode. But the whole retro-metabolism thing has been kept top secret, such that all records of it are kept in this top security vault, which I think is interesting. There's that general principle, isn't there? If we discovered aliens, then that would have a particular effect on human society, and there'd be panic and all this kind of stuff. And it seems that in this world, the Mistron threat is known about because the Mistrons broadcast their threats to the globe, but the actual details of how they're fought and what Spectrum know and all that kind of stuff is limited. And it's interesting that when some criminals get hold of that information, they should decide to use it for their own ends. When you think about it, there's the question of what were the Mistrons originally intending? Because it seems that the criminals are playing on the threat to their advantage. The Mistrons can't have known what they were going to do when they made the threat. Or do they? Is that a new Mistron power, like precognition? Were they going to blow up the Second National Bank anyway, and it's just a massive coincidence that that's where the criminals decide to go? Were they going to do something different and then change their mind? I don't think that's the criticism of the episode, it's just it leaves those threads unanswered. Also, when Captain Black does turn up, he looks weird this week, and then he looks more like his normal self at the end. People who know more about the production maybe could shed some light on why Captain Black looks different in this episode. It's nice to see the Mistron detector in action. It seems to have evolved from its first appearance, in that you had to press a button and the picture would pop out, whereas Captain Oka seems to be able to have results directly to his screen without all that faffing around. So it's nice to see that bit of continuity. That actually in the episodes since the Mistron detector was introduced, we've seen it twice in those 3 episodes. Just a shame that the Mistron gun again doesn't get another outing. Also nice to see Captain Magenta and Captain Oka playing a part. We had Captain Grey last week. This week we've got Magenta and Oka, and it's nice to see that it's not just about Captain Scarlet and Captain Blue running around doing everything. One of the things I failed to highlight a few weeks ago with Avalanche is that was the mission that Lieutenant Green got to get out of his chair and run around. We actually see that he does in fact have a hat like everybody else. So it feels that these last few episodes, they're really starting to kind of use the different Spectrum characters to their advantage. I haven't kept a brilliant track on voice actors, but it's nice to hear David Healy. I don't know whether this was his first appearance in Captain Scarlet, but he certainly feels like a fresh voice as the leader of the criminals. One of the things that I don't think I really noticed as a kid was the limited voice casts, that all the Super Mario Nation shows have, particularly the whole Stingray, Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, all have a good guy and bad guy voiced by the same person. Only in the case of Stingray and Thunderbirds, that's Ray Barrett doing all of those those roles with Titan and Sam Shaw and John Tracy and the Hood, and with Captain Scarlet it's Donald Gray as Colonel Boat, and then slowed down as the Mysterons. So it's always nice when there's a fresh voice popping into the voice cast. It's nice that there's room to do different things with the format. I think this episode succeeds in doing something a bit different and giving us a fresh insight into the world of Captain Scarlet and how it all plays out. Again, this week we have no Spectrum Agent report. More on that later. But first, I would like to pay tribute to Dave, Professor Dave, and his Ark in Space. Dave was a podcasting friend of mine from a long time back. If you are in any way familiar with the world of Doctor Who podcasting, you will remember him from the WhoCast. And then he went on to have his own podcast, Professor Dave's Ark in Space, which is him and his now wife. Basically, the early days of the podcast are them falling in love with each other, which was really sweet to watch from the outside. But he died last week. So this episode is presented as a tribute to him. And the sad thing for me personally was that he was going to contribute to this series with a couple of episodes towards the very end of the run. And we had been in communication very recently about that. Sadly, that will no longer happen, so I would have loved to have heard his thoughts. He and his wife did do an episode on Thunderbirds, so I will link to that in the description for this episode. So if you want to go and listen to Dave and Elizabeth talk about their love of that bit of Jerry Anderson, then follow the link. There's not really much else I can say other than rest in peace, Dave. Again, episode orders, it's a middle episode, wherever you put it. 11 on DVD, so slightly earlier in the run, 19 on VHS. That not really affecting continuity. Again, the Mysteron detector has already been introduced. And whether it will have an effect on future continuity, we have new Mysteron powers again. We have dematerialization. Though I suppose this isn't definitively the first time that they've done it, just the first time that Captain Scarlet has come across it. And I can't remember the context of the dematerialization power being used in subsequent episodes as to whether that would potentially break continuity if you rearranged episodes. Mysteron's still at large. Well, there aren't any Mysterons apart from Captain Black, so he's definitely still at large. Is this a win or a loss? I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I'm tempted to call it a draw again, because the Mysterons succeed in blowing up a piece of American infrastructure, and no doubt there's an effect on the economy from all the people who aren't working for a day, and from the effect that destroying all of that gold and money will have on the economy. But Colonel White's very clear early on. He's like, well, I'm not. If they're going to attack a bank, I'm not going to waste lives on saving a bank. So whether this is a complete victory for the Mysterons or not is not entirely clear. Ultimately, sort of the threat feels more inconsequential. So I'm going to call it a draw. And Mysteron puppets, well, there aren't any this week. I'm tempted to put the three. Maybe I will put the three robbers as honorary Mysterons on the gallery. You will have to visit UFOcast.co.uk to find out whether I have got round to doing that, because there will be a reasonable lag between me recording this and when this episode goes live, because I still haven't released any of these and we're on episode 13. So I'm recording this in November 2021. Bit of inside baseball for you. We'll wait and see how long it takes for this episode to arrive in your ears. Join me next week for Fire at Rig 15, and I was looking through my spreadsheet of prior ratings, and this is the first one I have a question mark in front of, because I don't really remember this at all. Is this the one in the desert with oil rigs? Possibly, but I don't actually remember. We will no doubt find out next week. Just a quick note on Spectrum Agent contributions. I have had a number of people now who, quite a while back, got in touch via the contact form on the website that I've set up for contributions, and I've never had a further response from them when I've emailed them back, and I wonder whether in some cases that's because my responses have gone into people's spam folders. So if you are one of those people that wanted to be part of this, particularly if the episode you chose has already come and gone, please do try and get in touch. UFOcast@yahoo.com or UFO_cast on Twitter. And if you haven't yet thought about it, if you think that you don't like the sound of your own voice, there is always the option of writing something that can be read out. We do have a contribution along those lines that will appear later in the run. I would like to hear from as many of you as possible so that we have as many other voices on this podcast other than mine, because otherwise it's just going to be my thoughts from here on in. I do have a spreadsheet with lots of people on it. I'm going to be contacting them in future weeks as we come up to their episodes, but thus far I've not had a lot of people come back to me recently. So I'd love to hear from those who have signed up and more of you who haven't. That sign-up sheet is ufocast.co.uk/captain.